You know, when you look at a map of the Middle East, you'll have a difficult time finding one country. You won't have a difficult time finding Libya or Syria or Egypt or so many of the other 22 or more Arab nations. There's one place that you'll have difficulty finding, a place called Israel, because it is that small. And the issue with Israel, going back to 1948, you know, back in 1948, the United Nations made a decision, which it brought to the world, that there should be a Palestinian and Jewish state. That was 1948. The Israelis, and by the way, if I was showing you a map and showed you what that state was going to look like, you would say, how could Israel possibly survive with those kind of borders? But Ben-Gurion, the prime minister at the time, said yes, he accepted this state. The other side, of course, said no. They had a chance to have a state. Maybe the whole conflict all of these years would not be taking place, but the other side said no. And 5 or 6 Arab nations with their armies attacked Israel with the goal of destroying the Jewish state. And by the way, is there any doubt if they had been successful, the massacres that would have taken place in the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem? By the way, in 1948, Jerusalem was going to be an international enclave. And of course, Israel was attacked. And ladies and gentlemen, from 1948 to this day, I do not believe there is a week that goes by that there is not an attempt to attack civilians in the state of Israel, to attack innocent men, women, and children. It happens all the time. From 1948 and on, Israel went to war in 1956, not because it wanted to go to war, because of the attacks on the state of Israel, on the Jewish state. 1967, I remember the Monday morning of June 6, 1967. It was weeks before the Egyptian army marching through the streets of Cairo, death to the Jews. That was the refrain. Nasser, they were going to destroy the Jewish state once and for all. And the Syrians from the Golan, they were going to do their job. And the Jordanians were going to do their job. And Israel was attacked from 3 directions. No apology for the fact that Israel was victorious. There is no apology. Thank God Israel was victorious. And we remember, you see, in 1967 there was a preemptive strike because Israel is a small country of 6.5 million people. Well, now 6.5, at that time maybe 3.5. In 1973, and I remember the Sabbath when we woke up on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Israel was attacked. Israel took the first blow at that time, Prime Minister Golda Meir, because they wanted to show the world that they would not be the first ones to attack. And that was a tragic mistake because there were so many losses on the part of Israel. And Israel defended itself, and Israel was victorious again. And then, just running through some of this, because there are no two sides. It doesn't mean that Israel is perfect and doesn't make mistakes. There's only one side, one country that is looking to survive, and others who are looking to destroy the state of Israel. In 1993-94, when Yitzhak Rabin, our president's good friend, Bill Clinton, trying to make peace with the Palestinians with Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat was going in and out of the White House almost every single day. No leader of any country went to the White House as often as Yasser Arafat, the leading terrorist that today we know what a fraud he was. And during that period, ladies and gentlemen, when Israel was prepared to make concessions, no one debates this. Everyone knows that Israel under Rabin, this is the center-left government, was prepared to make unbelievable concessions for peace. You know why? The people of Israel are ready to make concessions for peace. They only need a partner. And if you don't have a partner, you can't make peace with yourself. So Rabin went and sat with Arafat, broke the taboo of not dealing with this terrorist organization that was involved in killing, attacking schools, attacking restaurants, attacking buses, blowing them up. It doesn't matter who you kill and who you murder. It's all for the cause. Sort of like maybe September 11th. The more people you murder, the more innocent people you murder, the better, because it's all for the cause. So Rabin tried to make peace. And what was the result of that attempt? More destruction, more death, more mayhem, more murder, more Jews being murdered in the period of the peace talks in 1994 than 1948 to 1994. More Jews were murdered in 1 year than in the period of 1948 to 1994. Can you believe that? In the name of peace. And it didn't work. You know, some people forget. Ariel Sharon took communities in Gaza, Jewish communities, beautiful communities. I had the privilege of being there many times. And threw all the Jews out of those communities unilaterally. There was no agreement. He said, we're going to do the first thing. We're going to make the first step. 4 communities in Judea and Samaria were abandoned. The Jews were thrown out. Their synagogues were destroyed. Their community centers were destroyed. The lives of 10,000 people was turned upside down to this very day. That was 10 years ago, approximately. And what was the result of turning these territories over to Hamas? In the areas that I visited that had beautiful homes and beautiful schools, this terrorist organization, Hamas, the Al-Qaeda of the world, they build military installations to shoot missiles into Israel. That's what they're using the territory that Prime Minister Sharon turned over. And Israel has turned over repeatedly to try to make peace. Ehud Barak, the prime minister at Camp David, we all remember that, or maybe we don't want to remember. When the prime minister of Israel was ready to give up 98% of Judea and Samaria, 98%, out of his mind, by the way, but he was prepared to do it. And Yasser Arafat at Camp David, with Clinton and Dennis Ross and everybody else, who walked out of that deal, the deal they will never ever get again? 98% Judea and Samaria, dividing Jerusalem, something that is so dear to the Jewish people, the united capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem. Prime Minister Barak was ready to commit suicide for peace. And Ehud Olmert was the prime minister. And his negotiations, we'd rather forget. We'd rather not remember the facts. Don't confuse me with the facts. We're not interested in the facts. Ladies and gentlemen, I had the privilege of being in the north of Israel a couple of years ago. In fact, my colleague, David Weprin, joined us, a group. As Israelis were going the other direction in the north of Israel, in Tiberias and Safed, we were going in the direction of the missiles. It's another story why I was doing something so dangerous. I'm not totally nuts. But I was going that direction, and I saw the destruction of missiles falling on cities, missiles that were not aimed at the military, missiles that were not aimed at the police, missiles that were aimed at men, women, and children. Wherever they fall, whatever they destroy, so be it. Hezbollah, the enemy in the north that right now, as we speak, has 100,000 missiles available to use against Israel. What country in the world can tolerate a situation like that? And I had the privilege last summer, in August of last year, to go to Israel and go to the south this time during the war in the south. You all remember the missiles falling. Thousands of missiles. No apology for the fact that thousands of Jews were not murdered, that those missiles which landed everywhere in 20 different cities throughout Israel. The bottom line is, think for a second what it is like to live in a country, to live on your streets anywhere in the state of New York, in Brooklyn, on Ocean Parkway, Queens Boulevard, all the other thoroughfares where you live and where a lot of people congregate. Imagine you get a siren go off and you have 10 seconds to run for cover because you don't know where the missile is going to fall. I stayed in the South at a hotel in Beersheba. I remember sitting in the lobby and the siren going off, and women, mothers with their children in their arms running for cover. Is there any country in the world that lives in such a fashion, that has to deal with the situation in the north with Hezbollah, with Hamas in the south? I mean, we got to have a little bit of honesty about this. What are you supposed to do when your enemy sets up its launching of missiles among the population? That is what they're doing, purposely so. What are you supposed to do? Nothing? Just let your people be sacrificed? You're not supposed to defend yourself? I care for every child. I care for every innocent person. All of us do. But are you supposed to defend yourself? The United States right now is involved in bombing places in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, other places. How many innocent civilians have American bombs killed over the last few months? See, we don't have all the TV stations and all the international press. They're not going in there. They're not taking a chance. We know what happens to journalists when they stray in those parts of the world. They take their heads off. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's remarkable. 168 countries in the world, maybe it's 169 by now, in the United Nations, member nations of the United Nations. There is no BDS movement, ladies and gentlemen. How about for the Russians? Is there a BDS movement for the Russians? We know how wonderful they are when it comes to human and civil rights. We know how they treat their people. People who disagree with the government, they disappear. What about places like China? What about countries throughout Asia and Africa that mistreat its own people because they object to the government, because they have disagreements with the government, and those people disappear or end up in jail? Countries in Latin America where there is no democracy of any kind. Israel is a nation that cannot afford to make that mistake, ladies and gentlemen. It cannot afford one mistake. It cannot afford to lose one war, because if you lose one war, it's over. It's finished. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a no-brainer. You pick one country in the entire world. What do you want to call it? I know the new thing is, nobody wants to be called an anti-Semite. But the way to avoid that is to be anti-Zionist. Anti-Zionist equals anti-Semite. Anti-Semite equals anti-Zionist in almost all cases. We can have our disagreements. I don't think there's any country in the world that has more of an open press and more disagreement and more infighting than the state of Israel. It is a robust democracy, almost like no other country in the world. My colleague, thank you for sponsoring this. I know there's legislation that's going to come next year. Illinois just passed the Assembly, the Senate, Democrats, Republicans, governors going to sign it, anti-BDS legislation. This is about doing the right thing. It's not about saying I agree with every single action of the government of Israel. That is not what it is about. But Israel every single day fights for its survival. Thank you.